The image of Cuba is always shown through the perception of the big media, showing a lot of stereotypes about this island. But now this is changing. There's a new experience which uses the strength of the new technology to finally show a more honest image. Cuba 24 Horas is a website dedicated to show visual content of the reality of this country. To know more about how to use internet to bypass the manipulation of the big media, we met with Michel Lunca, the technological director of this website, who's also a professor on this issue. He's French, but he comes here very often. So, visual communications, Michel. Why are you passionate about this? Why did you decide to work in this field, specifically in internet? Why?
Because I'm coming from the visual world and communication with pictures, with animation. That's my first really core of interest, and that was my first job also. And when I were artistic director, I had that need to be more interested in how the pictures, how the explanation of some emotions or some messages are made technically. And I always have this passion for new technologies. I'm a little bit photographer also, so that expression just came naturally with the internet, because in internet and that kind of technology, you can just give visual messages, text messages, video messages. Actually, the first really thing that we can show the reality in life is the video. So,
an image is worth 1,000 words. That's an idea. And you're here now, Michel, because of the project Cuba 24 Hours, which is a website that shows web series and content, visual content about Cuba. Why are you here? What are the potentials of the website?
To tell you the truth, the first time we came here in Cuba, it was for another project. A project who involved video, and we went there, and I met Ismael Perdomo, and he told me about, I have a project I would like to show as a web series thing, but, may we talk about that? And I say, okay, let's do a website. And he told me, yeah, but we have a lot of problems with website. We have low connection. I was aware a little bit about the technical thing because, I know about the blockado, and no one in the world shows the reality of Cuba. That was the first, When on Cuba 24 Horas, the wording, show the reality of Cuba. That's not a marketing thing, We didn't went there and say, okay, we're gonna make a site to make maybe money or something like that. That's not our philosophy.
That's not your priority.
No. There are people who are working here in Cuba, producing videos, producing movies. The movies from Cuba, they're known by people who are interested in the cinema, in the movies. But they're not known by the majority of the people, We can talk about like Italian movies because there's a tendency. You can talk about the French, for sure, movies. After, from United States, we have that blockbusters and things like that, but not only. And from Cuba, there was all the time, like people were talking about quality, about things that there are nothing to do in the real movie, And after Ismael told me, may we do something like a real website where I can put some video series, web series, some documentary, and we start the project.
Great, and now we are in his facilities. I would like to see more. Michelle, even though Cuba 24 Hours is a website,
I wanted to know more about all this, how internet can empower people, and what are the potentials of Cuba in this area were my main questions to Professor
Cuba
Loncar.
24 horas.
Thank you.
To tell you, Christina, you know, the point of view of others, foreigners,
About Cuba, you mean?
about Cuba. To tell you an example, if you ask some French guy, for him, what's Cuba? He will tell you, he will talk to you about whole cars, whole buildings, nice girls, mojito, and
Like stereotypes about Cuba.
yeah, it's a really stereotype. And another example, when I'm coming to work here in Cuba, all my friends tells me, okay, good vacations. They can't imagine that another
And
country.
you're coming here to work.
Yeah, and I'm coming here to work. I never go on the beach, for example. And there's another Cuba. There's a real Cuba. It's normal. It's a society. It's a country. There are people who are working. There are teachers. There are people who are driving buses. You know, that's the first thing that we want really show that Cuba, it's a regular country. Regular, I mean, for me, it's not regular anymore because there's so much of creativity here, you know, just because for usual problem. In your life, you have problems. Here, the Cubans are a huge imagination to fix the problems they have every day. And the reality of Cuba makes you see that, for example, for art, there's art everywhere here. The art is in the street. You can find it in a house, regular house. In France, we had a problem with it. For example, the art is for some kind of people, but not for anybody. And what we wanted to show is the reality, but not anymore with only a few pictures, texts. That's all the time the same way to show what is Cuba. And the video, we had a problem here because low connection, and also more than that. For example, servers, you know, informatics servers.
Because for this kind of technology, you need good servers.
For sure, because every single video that we have on the site, you know, that weighs 100 mega octets, you know, and that is impossible to show it on a website in Cuba with a Cuban server. That's a fact. So we can't fight about with facts. You know, that's a technical fact, technical problem. So we just pass through this problem. We have servers outside Cuba, but all the contents were made by Cubans. You know, all the contents.
That live in Cuba?
The contents, that's Cubans who are living in Cuba. That's another point, because sites, actually, there's other sites who talks about Cuba, who show Cuban things. But you're all the time coming back that stereotype, you know? Cuba is not only music, it's not only salsa, even if it's good. And what we are showing, it's the life of Cuban in Cuba. And seen first by Cubans. That's a point of view 100% Cuban. And that's what we like to show to the world. We want to split the reality of Cuba in the world. That's the philosophy of Cuba 24 Horas.
That's great, and I think it's very pioneering here, this idea of bypassing the hegemony discourse that has to do with also with the discourse of the big media that has always a politicized way of seeing Cuba, of criticizing Cuba, sometimes without the correct context and the correct explanation about what's going on here. And I think it's very important, that's why Cuba 24 Hours could be like the first experience of a lot of that. And let's expand this explanation to other countries of the region. Here in Latin America, Michelle, we're seeing a political changing governments and a process of expanding democracy are distributing, and also distribution of wellness different than what we used to see before. Like a kind of new freedom from the capital,
Exactly.
from other kinds of governments. How do you think this kind of technology, this visual communication in websites, apart from the big media, can help this kind of political processes that we're seeing in Latin America?
First, to tell you an example, if you're watching all the time the same channel on your TV, you will have the point of view of this channel, and that's it. What we're trying to do is to make an offer for emergent countries, not only for Cuba, because Cuba is the first shot. So it's a kind of laboratory, you know. We had so much problems. I can't hide it. We had problems to make the thing. But now we have some solution that can be shared with other countries. If you want to embed some content on the server, you need a server. That's a fact. There's two ways to approach it. For example, there's a Microsoft technology for some kind of servers. So on this way, you will have to pay a license. You will have to follow the rules of Microsoft, etc., etc. And you have the other way. So we all the time when
What's
we
the
have
other way?
the
Free
other
software,
way,
for example?
it's like free system that you can embed on servers. So you won't have license to pay, but you will have a little bit more problem. But actually, you know, in informatic world, there's so many people who are working to be able to do offers. They're free. I mean, almost free for if you develop a module, for example. So to get there, an approach for a website, actually, you got two approaches. One side, you got a lot of money, and you inject it. You got programmers. You made it from scratch. And the other way, you are using work who's already done with a modular system. That's the example, the perfect example is Cuba 24 Horas. We tried to cut all the development that we had to do with that kind of modules, you know? And that modular system, it allows you, for example, for a little structure with a low price to have that kind of visibility that we have already in Cuba 24 Horas. To tell you a pragmatic example, I do a job in programming and I share this job. And that makes you take the way of another philosophy. Informatic, there's two worlds. That's the world of, you know, the giants, Microsoft, Google, and everything. And on the other hand, you got that people who tries to liberalize, you know, that languages.
I find a lot of common points with the philosophy of free software and Linux Torvald and Linux has to do with that?
Exactly, exactly. That's the core of the thing.
So you're saying that this philosophy can help empower people? So people can be shown in a more honest way?
Yeah, that's the honest way. That's the right word. For sure, that's the right word, you know. If you're lying on someone all the time, but if just once you show the truth to the people, it's sufficient, you know, it's sufficient. You don't have to say, okay, this person is very nice, it's very kind. You just have to show it.
And I have a question, and I would like your personal opinion, Michelle. There's a view in which, I mean, before internet, or not, I don't know your answer. Before internet, there was a perception that the media discourse and the discourse that supposedly tells about the reality, the news about people, was always managed by the strong ones, by the rich ones, and was always the word of the group powers or the groups that have the political or the economic power. There are people that say that after internet and the empowering of people, that has changed. But probably it's because I live in Cuba, I still think that there's a problem that has to be with equity, that has to do with access to internet. And do you think that internet makes possible that not anymore the big ones, the powerful ones, are the only one with the control of information? Do you think internet is changing this or can change this?
Sure, it will change it. It's not it can, but it will.
Do you think it's a romantic way of seeing this?
No, because, you know, we won't change everything. Actually, internet, you got one monster. For example, Google. He's a monster, you know. When I'm talking at my, you know, on the school, when I talking about that and visibility on the internet and everything, I say my first word is, Google is a monster, but you can be a little bit a friend of this monster. If you know the rules, you can follow the rules.
You can use it for yourself?
And you can use it even against them, you know. If I don't know how Google works, I can't do nothing. If I know that at least half of the algorithms that Google use, you know, to make reference, visibility, and everything, I can just use it. It's a little bit against him, but I follow the rules, you know. That's another point, who is a problem actually in Cuba. Maybe you don't know, but Google shares a lot of tools, webmaster tools, for example. But if you are in Cuba, you can't use it. You know?
Why?
When you are talking about big society that makes things against a country as Cuba, that's a fact. Why? Because you're in Cuba, and it doesn't allow you to just connect to that kind of tool.
Because of the blockade legislation you're talking about?
Actually, that's a fact. So our solution, every single action that we have to do for the site, we're doing outside Cuba.
So what you're saying is that you can empower people, but you have to use the tools of the big ones to position yourself. Because it's very important to write down in the box of Google, Cuba 24 hours, and appear in one of the first results.
For example, you can have a Gmail here in Cuba, but Gmail, it's another way to control what you're going to write in your Gmails. You know?
To know what you're doing.
To know what you're doing, to know which are the people who you're talking with them, you know. But the reality to be really, to exist really on the internet, that kind of tool, they won't share it, you know.
I think you've talked about how this philosophy can bypass the big media. What do you think are the potentials? I mean, you study this, you live from this, you even teach about all these things, and you have successful experience in your resume about this kind of philosophy of web content and all that. What do you think are the potentials that Cuba have in this field?
The potential is enormous, enormous.
It's huge.
Because that kind of problem, you can feel that kind of problem are technical problem. It's a reserve of human capitals, you know. One point, when I went to Cuba for this project, the second time I went in Cuba, I was thinking how we gonna do to find people who can work, because if they don't have connection, they don't have potential technically to make site. There's probably people who doesn't know nothing about internet. And at this point, I met people here in Cuba. They're so good programmers, so good, you know. There's people who very in the multimedia content, they're very good, you know. I don't have any French guy who works on programming here in Cuba. Only Cubans. So the potential is enormous, enormous. That's another fact that people doesn't know. They wouldn't believe it first. When I'm coming back in France and I say, okay, who really programmer of the site is in Cuba, is Cuban. So we find some ways to transmit, you know, databases and everything, because they're not that big, that's not video. But until we just fix the problem of how we can get the contents to put it on the server, that's the only problem we have with Cuba. All the rest of the thing, it's made by Cubans. For example, you know, I have a lot of friends, they're surprised when I'm telling them, you know, education in Cuba, it's free. You know? We all the time have this point from America. Everyone knows that you have to have a lot of money to educate your children in America. But that's the same in France. You know, at the beginning of the year, when your boy is going to school, you have to buy a lot of things. You know, if you don't want to buy a lot of things, it will be very badly seen by others, and etc. etc. You know, when we're telling, you know, for the safety, for the health in Cuba, that's another way, that's another system, another philosophy. You know. If you don't have money to go to see the doctor in France, that's just it. You can't do nothing. And worst in the United States. But in France, that's a fact. In Germany, that's the same fact. In Spain, that's Italy. All the European countries doesn't have this approach of social. All the social thing, you know, helping, you know. In Cuba, I see people helping others. They're helping each other. There's no anymore this philosophy in France, for example. You know, you don't know your neighbor. Here, you can borrow an egg, one egg. You know, that can appear like funny, but it's not funny. You know, you get a social, familiar structure, and I think that's the core of a society. And we lost this core outside of Cuba. You know.
Thank you very much, Michel.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and
Very well.
all the success to do this thing that you're doing.
We will fight.
Thank you.
Thank you.